All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Illinois Environmental Council's Policy 101 on the Inflation Reduction Act. We are really excited. We have a special guest here today, Congressman Sean Casten, to talk to us about the road to the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're also joined by IEC's very own Municipal Engagement Manager, Angela Hsu. So we're thrilled to have you all here. I'm going to kick us off with a little bit of an overview of the Illinois Environmental Council. And then we're going to pass it over to our executive director, Jen Walling, and then we're going to hear from our guests. So just to jump in about the Illinois Environmental Council, we've been around since 1975. We do work in the state of Illinois to safeguard our plants, animals, and the natural systems that life depends on. And we do that by building power for people in the environment. We represent more than 150 environmental organizations around the state of Illinois. And we carry out our mission to advance equitable public policies that create healthy environments across the state through collaboration, power building, and advocacy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We can go to the next slide. Very good. So IEC focuses on 6 issue areas when it comes to the environment. We look at sustainable agriculture, conservation, clean energy, equitable transportation, clean water, and zero waste. And obviously, I know many of you are thinking that these issue areas intersect and they come together. There are solutions that support either issue area, or some issue areas have solutions for other issue areas. And so we have a team on our programs and policy side of our work that are building relationships and coalitions with folks on the ground doing work in environmental advocacy around Illinois to ensure that we're bringing the voices to the table that know the issues, that are experiencing the issues, and have solutions in mind. We do legislator education at 3 levels of government. So we look at the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, and we do some work at the federal level as well. Legislator education is a big piece of our strategy. So we want to ensure that we're bringing decision makers outside and showing them the beautiful state that they work within and advocate for, to connect them to the issues that we work on. And we, of course, do policy advocacy. Go to the next slide. So just to give a little more detail on the affiliates that IEC represents, we work with more than 150 organizations, all of which are nonprofits, advocacy groups, civic institutions around the state. They vary in geographic scope, in size, and issue area. You know, as I mentioned, we focus on 6 issue areas, and our members might focus on one, they might focus on a piece of one, or they might focus on multiple. It's important to us to bring all those voices to the table in our work. Go to the next slide. So affiliate membership is, we really work similarly to a trade association. So we do, work around legislative leadership. We do bill tracking. We provide updates on policies that are being worked through at all levels of government. We have programs and policy staff that are experts that we pair with our affiliate members to provide them with a point of contact to ask questions, to provide solutions to, and that sort of thing. We do movement building. So we do advocacy, lobbying, coalition building. We have a lobby day this week that's quite exciting. And then we have office resources, communication support. And what I think is most important is that our policy platform and strategy is heavily influenced by our affiliates year over year as we do our work. So why are we doing these 101s? Because we reach such a broad, or we do work in so many different issue areas around the environment. We thought it was important this year to dig in. Each month we're tackling a different issue that we work within. And this month we're really excited because the Inflation Reduction Act really touches on a lot of these issues, right? It's a monumental, once in a lifetime investment from the federal government to support a clean energy transition nationally. And we're so lucky at the state, within the state of Illinois, to have such a powerful infrastructure for us to get going on that. So if you're interested in learning more about our work in all these areas, you can become a member or sign up for our emails and that sort of thing. But for now, I will turn it over to Jen Walling, IEC's Executive Director, to provide an introduction to Congressman Casten.
Great. Great. Thanks, everybody. Sorry for that. I am just really excited to introduce Congressman Casten. And I know I have a little bit of his bio in front of me, but he is one of my favorite people. He came into this role wanting to lead on clean energy and climate, and is doing that. And it's really exciting to have a congressman come in already knows way more than I do about anything clean energy and climate, and especially technology. It's so great to have someone in that leadership role. He's been recognized by national organizations for his leadership, and it's so exciting. I am going to read a little bit of his bio. As a scientist, clean energy entrepreneur, and CEO, and now as a member of Congress representing the western suburbs of Chicago, Congressman Sean Casten has dedicated his life's work to fighting climate change. In Congress, Rep. Casten draws upon his previous clean energy experience in the private sector to craft market-based solutions to reduce emissions while creating jobs and spurring economic growth. In fact, he championed the passage of Illinois' nation-leading Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. Rep. Casten serves on the House Financial Services Committee and is vice-ranking member of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. He also serves as the vice chair of the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition and is a co-chair of the Sustainable Investment Caucus. While working diligently in Washington on behalf of Illinois' 6th Congressional District, Rep. Casten is also committed to keeping in close contact with his constituents. And with that, I want to pass the mic over to Congressman Casten.
Thank you so much, Jen. And first, I have to correct one thing you said in there. You said that I think you said that I know more than you do about climate change, but the record will show that we did a scientifically controlled experiment with Tom Skilling doing Earth Day Jeopardy with you, me, and Bill Foster, and you kicked both of our butts. So, you know, the IEC is in good hands with you. So thanks for having me. I realize I'm crowding the screen there. I want to talk a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act, what it is, and what we do from here, and frankly, how we can better work with you all. I mean, this was a process, and I take a lot of pride in what's there. As I said to some MIT people who were quantifying the effects of the IRA for us this morning, and I want to get into that later. One of the things that I think you're always reluctant to do as a politician is dance in the end zone when the game isn't over yet. But I think it's appropriate to dance in the end zone because the Inflation Reduction Act really is the biggest climate bill ever passed by any government anywhere in the history of our species. That's a big deal. Is it enough? No, that speaks to the volume of the challenge we have, but it was really a big deal that it got it done. What that came out of ultimately was the climate committee that I was proud to be appointed to in my first term, and under Kathy Castor's leadership and Nancy Pelosi, who set it up. That committee, we came up with a series of policy recommendations that would be commensurate to the scale of the climate challenge. And when I say commensurate, we had a bunch of outside people come in and vet us and say, what do we have to do and is this sufficient? Their conclusion was that the set of proposals we'd come up with would meet about 80% of what the United States needed to do. That's not because we didn't want to be more ambitious. Some of those were hard to score, but some of it just gives a sense of how big the challenge is. That had 700 distinct policy proposals in it. A little over 300 of those are now law, either primarily because of the Inflation Reduction Act, some because of the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That's a heck of a batting average when it comes to Congress. And so our challenge now is both to make sure that we implement that legislation well, and then also to say, okay, what do we have to do from here? And I want to speak a little bit to the implementation. Well, let me just first mention what these folks did this morning. There's this group at MIT that does this, has had this analysis out for a long time, that you can play with any metric you want. You want to ramp up 1 trillion trees. What's the impact of that on land use? What's the impact of that on CO2 emissions? What's the impact on the economy? You want to ramp up efficiency. You want to make a bet that we'll have fusion energy. You can play all these little metrics. And I asked them to rerun their model and say, can you take this back to what you thought the base case was before the Inflation Reduction Act was passed and what it is now? And the good news is it takes about 0.6 degrees of warming out of the atmosphere. That's amazing to have done that. We've got to get a lot more than that. But that in of itself is a big deal. On the implementation side, and I'm going to just pop a little link here in the chat for you all to play with whenever you like. This is data the White House has now put together showing all of the private sector capital, not the public money, the private sector capital that has been deployed as a direct result of the Inflation Reduction Act. And if you look at it in the data, you can also see some of that's infrastructure, some of it's chips and science. And you can pull up Illinois in that map. And Illinois has seen $8 billion with a B dollars of private sector investment directly as a result of that. Not shown there, but back to the other side. That's the result of $863 million of public investment through tax credits, through matching programs that have gone into Illinois. So there's a huge leverage effect there, right? We've got a 10-to-1 impact on those private dollars pulling public money from the projects that we can directly tie to that program and pull it forward. So take a look around, look at their states. I think one of the challenges that I would put to you all to think through, I don't have an answer to this. Sounds like a joke. I'm just asking questions. Illinois is about 4% of the US population. It's about 4% of US GDP as well. We've received about 1% of the total monies that have gone out the door from this program. If you look at that list. Now, you probably shouldn't include the chips and science money in there because those are such big lumpy projects. But even if you take that out, we're a little less than 2%. So what are the states doing that are getting more than the share you would expect as compared to Illinois, who's getting a bit less? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think and I don't think it would probably be appropriate for the federal government to weigh in on that, but I do think there's an opportunity there for folks like you guys at the IAC, other states to say, what are best practices, maybe like the Association of State Energy Offices. I think there's a real opportunity to figure out how to make sure that we get more of those monies that's through there. The second piece that I think we've got to do going forward is, I want to be a little greedy. When I said that we got over 300 of the 700 policy recommendations passed through, that's something to be proud of. It also means we didn't get 400. And those were good bills. And by and large, what we didn't get was that, I don't know if you all remember when we had Build Back Better and that became the Inflation Reduction Act, that transmogrification was because the Senate did not have the votes to pass the Build Back Better with a filibuster-proof majority. And in the absence of a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, they could only use reconciliation. That's a lot of fancy words of Senate speak for saying that it only takes 50 votes in the Senate to spend money. It takes 60 votes to change the policy to get the private sector to spend money. So it's insanely easier for us to spend money. So that became largely a tax incentive bill, and we didn't get the policy changes done that we know we need to do. We are overdue for an energy policy. Last time we had a major energy policy bill was 2005. Before that was 1992. Before that was 1978. We're due. We left a lot of that policy stuff on the floor because we couldn't get it through Senate procedure. Our office has been working a lot on transmission permitting, which is a huge piece. It doesn't cost the public anything, but how do we change the rules so that utilities have an incentive to decongest the grid, to lower the cost of energy? Those incentives are at odds with each other. Mike Levin and I are working on this bill. We've introduced the Clean Electricity Transmission Act, Acceleration Act. Happy to talk through it in questions, but we got to do that. We've got to do larger questions on energy policy. We have huge questions around where climate is creating financial risk in our society, how to disclose that, how to quantify it, how to shift economic incentives. All those things are things that we need to do. And frankly, also, want to make sure that we work with you all about saying, as we're now looking at the deployment of these monies, where's the federal government being inefficient? Where are we creating roadblocks that are slowing the deployment? How can we tweak it going forward? Because yes, we passed the biggest bill ever. Yes, we can dance in the end zone, but I still want to win the game. And the game is won when we pass along a better planet to our kids than the ones we inherited from our parents. And we're not there yet, but we're making some good progress towards that goal. So I hope that's helpful. I hope it's good context, and look forward to both working with you in the longer term and answering any questions you got in the immediate term. Thanks, Jen.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Congressman Casten. Really appreciate that. I have a couple questions, and I want to encourage our audience here to put any questions you might have in the Q&A box. So I'll just go ahead and start with what I've got, and feel free to answer however you'd like. So first, at the federal level, how are you seeing the information being shared, or the conversation about sharing information down to constituents about how to access IRA dollars?
So for the people who have the great good fortune to live in Illinois 6th, contact our office. Even if you don't live in our district, we've got a we've got a part on our website that goes through specifically of all the programs. We try to stay on top of that. You know, where there are tax incentives and there's treasury guidance, that's easy. Where it's you know, an agency now is issuing has a solicitation open and it closes on such and such a date. And we try to stay on top of that as well. We've also tried, and I don't know if we're getting all this, but we've had a lot of people who've called and said that if you want to put an EV charger in your garage, you're not particularly interested in knowing just what the federal incentives are. You also want to know what are the incentives in CEJA? Are there local rules in place? And so we've tried where we can to pull those together. We probably do a better job, but I think having those things, and maybe IAC can do a role of doing that and try to be the clearinghouse for it. It's hard. I mean, you pass these laws and you get all these incentives out the door. The agencies don't get bigger, right? They just have more work to do. And so we try to do our best to communicate and amplify, but if we can help, give us a ring.
That sounds great. Thank you. Another question, at the federal level, what do you consider to be a benchmark of success for IRA implementation? Either one that we've seen so far or a benchmark that you're looking towards in the short or long term?
Look, let's be honest, parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. Like, right? I mean, that's the only goal that really matters. And success is 350. We've overshot. I mean, I've said for a long time that any politician saying we need to eliminate CO2 emissions by 2050, and another one says, no, we need to implement it by 2030. All of them are ambition constrained, because we need to stop emitting CO2 by about 1995, because that's the last time we were around 350 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. That sounds crazy, but I want folks to understand that 50% of all the CO2 we have ever emitted as a species since we first learned how to build a fire is since 1995. Right? That sort of rate of acceleration is shocking. And we're a long way from that point, because that means not only what we've done in the IRA to accelerate the deployment of zero carbon technologies, not only what we did in the infrastructure bill to accelerate the R&D and the chips and science to accelerate the R&D and technologies that aren't yet ready for deployment, but we've also got to find some way to suck CO2 out of the atmosphere, and to do that in a durable, safe, sustainable way. And I'm not saying that's easy, but I'm just saying, what other measures of success are there? But the last time that the CO2 levels were as high as they are right now in the atmosphere, sea levels were like 3 meters higher. We've locked that in. Scientists will debate, I think the general consensus is it's probably 1,000 years before the glaciers melt. But we also know that by 2050, sea levels on the Gulf Coast are going to be 2 feet higher, which means that if you have a second home in Pensacola, it will not be here before the mortgage is paid off. That is locked in. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm saying invest accordingly.
Right. That's great. Okay, great. We've got more questions rolling in. So thanks for your efforts on fighting climate disruption. What is the status of HR 6747, the Clean Electricity and Transmission Acceleration Act? Is there anything we can do in Illinois to help pass, or to get this past the finish line?
So thanks a bunch. So Mike Levin and I wrote this bill really in the wake of realizing that we had a window when we controlled the House and the Senate and the White House at the end of last term, but we didn't have a vehicle. And so there was this brief conversation around transmission permitting. And for context, we know that to realize the goals of the IRA, we have to build transmission at 2 to 3 times the rate that we've ever built transmission in the country. So that permitting barrier is a problem. We didn't have a vehicle, and we left it to the Senate to put the vehicle together. That fell under the jurisdiction of Mr. Manchin, and Mr. Manchin did not get it done. Whatever you think of Manchin, like he was tasked to solve a political problem, not to solve a policy problem, and arguably he failed on both counts because we can get a bill. So Mike Levin and I put CETA together to say, let's put a bill together so that when we're ready, this vehicle is there. So this is a bill that addresses market issues, it addresses permitting issues, it addresses environmental justice issues. We socialized that with with the whole breadth of the Democratic caucus. And it's been endorsed by the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the sort of far left wing, the New Dems, that's sort of the more centrist wing, SEEK, the Sustainable Energy and Environmental Caucus. We're up to about, I think, we're like 80 or 81 people who have co-sponsored the legislation. If your representative is not on that co-sponsor list, call them up, encourage them to get on. What we really want to do is to make sure that when we get the gavels back, that this can be one of the centerpieces of legislation going forward. I would say one of the issues that we're spending a lot of time with right now is to really make sure that we've got the labor community on board. There are some challenges that I think we're very sensitive to. If you open up, if you fix markets so that everybody has access to the cheapest possible energy sources, you're going to shut down some coal plants, right? Prairie State, downstate Illinois is not running because it's cheap. It's running because they got a contract structure that forces people to buy expensive power. It's bad for the environment, it's bad for the economy, but it's a good employer. And so I think, what we've been working on is trying to make sure that as we do what has to be done economically, as we do what has to be done environmentally, we don't leave the folks on labor behind. And so I think, for folks who are, in the labor community, please reach out to us and work on it, because we want to make sure that we have that block of folks on board as well. And this is a question of how to make sure that this huge piece of pie we're cooking has a slice for everybody, and not to be a zero-sum conversation.
Yeah, that's great. So when will the IRA rebates be available in Illinois, and how will they be launched?
They're all available right now. Like if you're, if you go, I guess you probably can't see it on that list I sent. I've got spreadsheets. You can see a whole lot of solar farms that have been built. People have received their tax credits that you can go and you can file. Now, some of those, to be fair, if you're a taxpayer, if you're claiming the tax credit, maybe it'll be on next year's taxes, depending on when you did the project. If you bought an electric vehicle last year, you can, hopefully you declared that when you filed your taxes on April 15th, because you can go get that back. Treasury did just finalize the rule on refundability. So if you're a municipality, if you're a nonprofit, if you are, otherwise someone who does not have, doesn't have a tax obligation and therefore can't use a tax credit, we put these provisions in the IRA that Treasury just finalized, I think, a month ago, that allows the one-time sale of that tax credit. So you don't pay taxes, but you call up your local bank, your local financially successful company, say, hey, I've got a tax credit worth $1,000. Want to buy it from me? What's the price? I'm thinking 1,000. Yeah, you can have a negotiation, but that's, you can now sell that over so that folks who don't have tax liability can monetize that as well. And again, that guidance all out there, but go get it.
That's great. Very good. And I know Angela will be talking a little bit more about some of that today too. So it's a great question to tee us up for a little bit. Angela, for a time check, how much more time do we have for Q&A here before we move on? Got another 5 minutes? Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be totally fine.
Great. Okay, so we've a lot of questions rolling in. So the next one, from what I have heard or read, we need to discuss climate. We need to discuss every issue in order to prevent a disastrous climate outcome. Where are you on changing our farming industry regarding regenerative farming and similar practices in the agriculture space?
So I'm not going to claim to be a farmer. We have been working on this bill, the Cover Act, to allow farmers to reduce their crop insurance payments per acre for every acre they plant cover crops in. And that's actually an existing Illinois law, which is also a law in Iowa, which is also a law in Wisconsin, which is also a law in Indiana. And so we've taken that and put a federal program on top of that. I mention that not because that's the entirety of the solution, but because I was talking to a reporter about it, and they said, "So do you have a lot of agriculture in your district?" And I joked and I said, I've got 5 tomato plants in my backyard, and I think that's probably 20% of the agricultural output of my very, very suburban district." I'm slightly overstating, but you take the point.
Yeah.
But I say they just say, like, I'm not a farmer. I do, the way that I've viewed it is that because we have to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere, um, the agricultural sector has to play a role, because arguably it's the only sector where you can suck CO2 out of the atmosphere and generate positive cash flow even before getting paid for the CO2 reduction. Practices you can do, whether it's cover cropping, whether it's enhanced rock weathering, biochar, stuff you think of, things that put more carbon into the soil also tend to increase the fertility of the soil, the health of the soil, which increases crop yields. And so we've got to do that. Al Gore has made the point on a number of occasions that if you look at soils that have never been through the agricultural revolution, and you look at the carbon content of those soils and you compare it to soils that have been more depleted, and just extrapolate globally, there's probably 60 to 80 parts per million of CO2 that in theory you could suck out of the atmosphere and store in soils. It's a huge deal. Now, how do you meter that? How do you prove it's durable? How do you make sure that your good stewardship practices are followed by the person who you sell the farm to down the road? That's tricky, but it's got to be a part of the solution.
Great. Thank you so much. We do have more questions coming through, and I wonder if maybe we can send a list over to your team and get some answers to report out to folks later. I don't want to take up all of your time, but really, really, really appreciate you coming on and talking with us today and sharing so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for all you do, and do keep in touch. Like I said, I'm hoping we got the gavels back and we're talking about how to do IRA 2.0 next term. And I suspect a lot of you have some good ideas on it.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
I'll turn it over to Angela from our team.
Thank you so much, Congressman Casten. All right, and hello, everyone. I want to share my screen. All right, let me know if you can see that. But hello, everyone. My name is Angela Shute, and I am the Municipal Engagement Manager with the Illinois Environmental Council. I will be presenting today on some high-level information about the Inflation Reduction Act, its programs, and its benefits. This is a lot of information, and so please rest assured that a recording of today's webinar and a copy of the slides will be available to you. So let's start with some background. Signed into law in 2022, the IRA is the largest investment in clean energy in United States history, and the most significant action that our nation has ever taken on climate change. This gives money directly to the people. These are once-in-a-generation federal investments projected to achieve up to a 40% reduction in climate pollution by 2030. We're already seeing the positive impacts of climate-friendly projects across the country, creating 271,000 good clean energy jobs. The state's 2021 Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, or CEJA, is the most equitable clean energy jobs bill of its kind in the nation. It laid the groundwork to make federal funding opportunities possible in Illinois. And we'll hear a bit more about this, just how it played into the IRA rollout in Illinois when we talk about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So to aid successful IRA implementation and to share this information with the state of Illinois, IEC has held 50 meetings in 2024 so far to connect with local leaders. I saw a question in the Q&A that said, how can municipalities or cities like Macomb, really help implement IRA? So I'm hoping that this presentation today will help. And I'm also very open to connecting with you all to talk about what initiatives that you're interested in. We're also sharing IRA fact sheets for homeowners and renters, community members who are interested in purchasing electric vehicles, sharing what benefits are available to local governments and municipalities. And just like today, we host presentations and lunch and learns. Now let's look into the programs. This image is not comprehensive, but shows a few of the buckets of funding that we will talk about today. For example, there's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or the GGRF, under which we have the Solar for All program. There's the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, the CPRG, a lot of acronyms, as you can see. There's also the Rural Energy for America program, REAP. I saw a lot of really great questions about how can rural Illinois and farmers benefit. And then there's also the Environmental and Climate Justice programs, under which we have the Community Change Grants. And then separate from these programs, we also have various tax credits, reductions, rebates, as well as direct pay. So we'll start with the GGRF. It's the US EPA's $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund that provides financing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for communities. These can be used to create state or city green banks, and green banks are important sources of low-cost capital for emerging clean tech sectors in a state. So under CEJA, the Green Bank in Illinois was created. The Illinois Finance Authority, or IFA, was authorized to establish the Illinois Climate Bank, allowing them to apply for IRA programs on behalf of the state. So the GGRF is a $14 billion national clean investment fund competition, and there was a nonprofit called Coalition for Green Capital that was awarded $5 billion of this funding. And the IFA was actually announced recently as a sub-awardee of that award. And so the IFA also received a $156 million award from the US EPA's Solar for All program, and it will bring benefits of solar energy to low-income and disadvantaged communities across the state. Next, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. The CPRG helps states, local governments, and metropolitan statistical areas plan and implement policies and projects that achieve or facilitate climate pollution reduction. First, states compile projects into a climate action plan, or a PCAP, which will lay the groundwork for the second phase, which is competitive implementation grants, and there's $4.6 billion available there. The state of Illinois submitted its PCAP to the US EPA on March 1st, and you can actually go on the Illinois EPA website and view it. And then on April 1st, Illinois applied for the implementation grant funds through the CPRG for the general competition. So again, like I said, this is a lot, but stick with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Additionally, Illinois farmers and rural small businesses are eligible for grants under the Rural Energy for America program. In the second half of 2023 alone, over 200 Illinois farms and small businesses received funding for renewable energy projects. And in fact, the USDA announced on April 23rd awards for Lorain, Ursa, Bowen, and Mason City, Illinois. So how can municipalities and regions help? So the Environmental and Climate Justice Program funds financial assistance and technical assistance for programs that benefit underserved and overburdened communities. Congress appropriated $2.8 billion for financial assistance and $200 million for technical assistance. The EPA has created a map that will help potential applicants, as well as there are Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or EJ TICTACs. These provide tools and resources to underserved and overburdened communities. And there are 2 EJ TICTACs in Illinois, kind of these cohorts of organizations and also universities that help. There's Blacks and Green, as well as an array of universities such as the University of Minnesota, and also the UIUC, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, that provides these supports. And I'm going to go back to the community change grants. It's one such program under the Climate Justice Program. There are $2 billion in IRA funds for environmental and climate justice activities to benefit disadvantaged communities. And applications are to be submitted by November 21st for this program. Now let's start talking about the tax credits and rebates. I know that was a big question in the chat. So a lot of the funding in the IRA is offered through 2 types of tax credits. You have the investment tax credit, or the ITC, and the production tax credit, the PTC. The ITC reduces upfront investment costs for a project, like a solar PV system or a battery storage project that's installed during the tax year. So in contrast, the PTC generates tax credits per kilowatt hour of energy produced for the first 10 years of the project's operation. Additionally, there are tax bonuses that will increase the amount of tax credits, which are also referred to as adders. Now, there are many credits and deductions under the IRA. This list is not comprehensive either, but we're going to go over a couple of them. So, for example, the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit, as the name would suggest, provides a tax credit for investment in facilities that generate clean electricity. Now, all Americans should benefit from the growth of the clean energy economy, and the IRA invests in communities to create good-paying jobs. There are some credits available to communities impacted by coal mine closures, and such programs are involved with the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities. The IRA invested $10 billion in the Qualifying Advanced Energy Project Credit, or 48C. The Treasury, the IRS, The US DOE all announced up to $4 billion in a first round of tax credits for clean energy manufacturing, recycling, processing, and greenhouse gas reduction at industrial facilities. Now, there's also $1.6 billion set aside for projects in energy communities, providing an investment tax credit up to 30% for certified projects that meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. And I'll talk more about the energy community tax credit bonus. It applies a bonus of up to 10% for projects, facilities, and technology located in energy communities. So what is an energy community? It's defined as a brownfield site, a metropolitan statistical area, or a non-MSA, or regions and counties where a coal mine closed after 1999, or where a coal-fired electric generating unit has been retired after 2009. And the US DOE has this really great map that you can actually find the different energy communities across the state of Illinois. And you'll see central and southern Illinois actually light up. And you'll see the census tracts where there's been coal mine closures, as well as the MSAs or the non-MSAs that actually meet and qualify for this tax credit. All right, next, the low-income communities bonus credit program. It also provides a 10 or 20% increase in investment tax credit for qualified solar and wind energy facilities. It prioritizes job creation and provides benefits to underserved communities. The domestic content bonus credit also applies a bonus, and it's for renewable energy facilities that are constructed with a minimum percentage of manufactured components from the United States. And it provides a 10% bonus of facilities financed by the ITC and the PTC that comply with the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. In fact, it directs nearly $400 billion in federal incentives to developing new clean energy and technology, such as solar photovoltaic, wind, geothermal, and battery storage. So let's say you receive the 30% clean electricity investment tax credit. For example, then you add 10% from the energy community adder plus another 10% from the domestic content adder. So already there is 50% or half in tax credits for your project. And another really important part of the IRA is elective pay, also known as direct pay. Municipalities and other applicable entities are eligible for direct pay, making clean energy investments easier. Government entities can, for the very first time, directly receive a payment equal to the full value of tax credits for building qualifying clean energy projects. You first have to go through a pre-filing registration process through the IRS. Then you can claim and receive an elective payment by making this election on your annual tax return. If you make the investment, you get the money, and the funds are not competitive. So again, this is huge. It's not capped, which means you can keep claiming the credits annually. And this benefit is that the funds are received directly from the IRS. Applicable entities can use direct pay for 12 of the IRA's tax credits, including the ITC, the PTC, or as we talked about earlier, the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit. All right, so with home electricity, electrification, and appliance rebates, these are very helpful for homeowners and renters at lowering the cost of purchasing environmentally friendly appliances or home upgrades. So for example, in effect this year, 2024, the HEEHRA, or the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Act, provides an upfront discount for heat pump costs up to $8,000. So that's already in effect. The IRA's Energy Efficient Home Improvement Credit also provides up to $2,000 annually in tax credits to lower the cost of a heat pump installation by 30%. And I know there's a question in the chat about, well, how about the home energy rebates from the Illinois EPA? So what we have heard is that it's most likely going to start rolling out in Q1 of 2025, and they're actually going to be holding public input sessions, and IEC is keeping track of those. We'll be sharing information as soon as we find out. There's also benefits available to local governments, nonprofits, and individuals who recently purchased electric vehicles or are looking to electrify their fleets. And these are some of those programs. For example, if you bought an American-made electric vehicle starting in 2023, you can get up to $7,500 in a tax credit back. Next, I want to talk about a really valuable resource for different municipalities. So the Climate Program Portal is an excellent resource to share federal funding updates. Municipal leaders and decision makers can easily make an account. The portal pulls together crucial summary data, news, requests and updates related to the climate elements of the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law. So as you can see from this map here that they have, it's interactive. You can see how much funding has been awarded so far in the entire nation. And let's say you want to look at Illinois. So far, Illinois has received $3 billion total in funding for however many projects. You can click on what kind of projects have been funded. You can look at it regionally. And I just really highly recommend this program portal to anybody who is interested in looking at federal funding in the country. And last note that I'll leave you with is the power of storytelling. So at IAC, a big, I would say, like benchmark of success for us is we want to create visibility to spread awareness of these available programs and that they are working. We want to celebrate the success of an IRA program to show how it is benefiting the community, and stories can help us see those cause and effect relationships. So if you have a success story, we welcome you to share them. Please reach out to me. We want to make sure that the money is getting to the people through the Inflation Reduction Act. And that is my presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Angela. I want to encourage folks to put questions in the chat there. Some have been coming through, and Angela, I answered some, and so they're in the answered section. If you want to touch on any of those, if you have additional feedback, please take a look. And while we wait for folks to put some questions in the chat, do you mind going to the next slide? I just have a couple of things I want to go over with folks while they're thinking of their questions. So as a part of these 101 series with IEC, I wanted to just draw your attention to some topics that we'll have coming down the pike. So in June, we'll be doing a 101 on equitable transportation, July, clean water. August, we'll be looking at food systems and sustainable agriculture. September, we'll do clean energy. In October, we'll look at workforce. So if you'd like to learn more, there is a website here that you can go to sign up as those dates become available. You can also, if you go to the next slide, become a member of IEC, and becoming a member of our organization gets you information more quickly. We do newsletters and we provide information and ask for support in our work on a regular basis. Membership for a year is $50. There are special rates, and there are plenty of ways to engage with us inside and outside of membership. So I want to encourage folks to take a look at that. If you have questions about individual membership, we're also happy to talk to you about that. So your presentation was very, very detailed. So it seems like you got at a lot of people's questions early, because I'm not seeing a ton pop in now, but maybe if we want to go over just some of the ones that were answered. Someone asked about nonprofits and how they might access some of these resources. Do you want to speak to their to nonprofits' ability to access those funds?
Yes, absolutely. And again, this is a lot of information, and it's because such a monumental and dense and complex piece of legislation. And so as much information as we can share with you, we're more than happy to. And I will also provide our IRA fact sheets as well. And we encourage that you share this information with your community partners and members. So yes, regarding our municipalities, there are a lot of benefits available. So for example, the environmental justice focus of the IRA is so available for municipalities. So the Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grant Program, the Community Change Grants, which I'm always encouraging people to apply for at this time. They help implement these activities to benefit the overburdened communities. And again, the deadline to apply for those is in November. There's also the Low Income Communities Bonus Credit Program, which I mentioned. And so if you employ domestically manufactured parts, your communities can benefit from solar and wind, and also from energy community economic development. And again, look into direct pay. There's the CPRG that the Illinois EPA had submitted. And then also there's a clean energy investment tax credit. And if you have a commercial building in your municipality, there's also the energy efficiency commercial buildings deduction that you can apply for. So let's say you have a large scale retrofit like heat pumps or HVAC improvements. Those will improve energy efficiency. And the only, I think the requirement is that the retrofits must achieve an energy usage like deduction by at least 25%.
That's great. Thank you. Someone asked how they can get involved in the work IEC does. Definitely becoming a member is a great way to get involved. We also do lobby days. So tomorrow, if you don't have anything going on and you want to come down to Springfield, we're doing a lobby day on climate action. Next week, we'll be doing a lobby day on zero waste. So reach out to me and Angela. If you go to the next slide, I think our emails are up there. And so if you have questions, more questions about how to get involved, there you go. We're more than happy to connect with you on that. So moving on to the next question, do these fact sheets include PowerPoints? Angela, do you want to talk a little bit about our fact sheets?
Yes, so we will share these fact sheets with you, and in the electronic version, you can actually click on the name of each program and it will take you directly to the website of the agency or the program information where you can learn more and see how you can apply for those. They are dedicated for homeowners and renters, for people, local governments, small businesses interested in purchasing electric vehicles or electrifying their fleets. And then there's also one that's dedicated to local governments and nonprofits too.
That's great. Melanie asked, as an individual, what can I do with this type of information? Should I be encouraging local officials to support this work? That's a great question.
I definitely think so, yes. And also share this information with your community members. Like, let's say your friend is interested in buying a new heat pump. Say, oh, I have this information and you can actually earn money back. And that's what we want to see, is that community members are really benefiting from electrifying. We want to see their utility bills go down. And as an individual, speaking to your representatives and saying, how can we, get this information out there and spread it around?
Perfect. Donald had more of a comment than a question, but I think it's worthwhile to share it out with folks. So Donald learned that for getting a tax credit for a new heat pump, he qualified for a credit limit of 30% of the cost up to $2,000 per form, $56.95. There was a separate home energy audit that qualifies for 30% credit up to $150. So it's helpful information. Thank you for sharing that. The next question we have, would the EV tax credits work towards electric equipment, looking at forklifts, energy storage units, etc.?
So that is a really great question. And so there is a lot of guidance out there from the Treasury and the IRS, and there's actually multiple different electric vehicle credit programs. So it actually just really depends on the programs and the one that you're looking into. I know that fleet electrification for like mid-sized to heavy duty vehicles is one, for example, but it really just depends on the program.
We don't have any other questions in the chat, so I think we've answered everyone's questions as we can so far. We'll have a recording of this webinar that we can share out with folks. We'll share out the fact sheets that Angela's been working on with the team, and then we can also circulate some of the questions that we didn't get to with Congressman Casten to try and get some of those answers back to folks, so we can work on that and share out as well. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm still not seeing anything in the chat, but we can hang on here for a minute or two. Just appreciate everyone's time today.